Happy New Year! Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. Today's video, I wanted to do a little bit of a recap. You know, in the month of December, I didn't actually do as many collection and ranking kinds of videos as I did last year because I had other things that I was focusing on. So today I want to talk about all of the eyeshadow palettes that I actually purchased in 2023 and whether or not I still have them. I will say that I did actually acquire a few more palettes than are mentioned in today's video, but they were gifts from other people, or in the case of the Flare palette from Ace Beauté, I had it and I ended up buying it in the new formulation to replace the old. So I did technically buy that palette, but it wasn't really bringing in a new palette, it was just replacing in a better formulation. So I'm not really counting that one, but if I were to count it, I just mentioned it, so there you go. Anyway, I want to talk about all the palettes that I bought and whether or not I still own them, because at this point my collection is pretty well curated. I am very familiar with my style, my aesthetic, my preferences, my favorite brands, and I'm really careful about bringing something in because I want to make sure that it's going to be well used, much appreciated, and kind of fill a gap in my collection. I think that I've got 21 palettes to mention today, which is like 50% of what I own as far as numbers. So let's just have a look and see if I did a good job last year of bringing in only things that I love, use, and have survived a declutter. While I was making this list, I went back through my YouTube videos and I recorded kind of in order the palettes that were new. So I'm going to go based on that information. So at the end of last year, I did do a collection tour and declutter. If I have decluttered the palette, it may still be in my possession because it hasn't sold yet or hasn't been given away, but I'm not considering it part of my collection because as far as I'm concerned, it's gone and I'm not going to use it anymore. That segues us perfectly into the Muppets palette from ColourPop. Oh, okay, so I actually really like the color story of the Muppets palette, and it was reviewed pretty decently by my favorite YouTuber, Angelica, but when I used this palette, I just found it to be a huge disappointment. It had so much potential, but when I actually played with it, I felt that the shadows didn't perform the way I wanted them to. I have so many palettes in my collection, which is mostly indie at this point, that I can get really similar looks in much better quality. I got the Muppets palette secondhand. I thought it'd be fun to play with, but no, I was wrong, and it is officially decluttered from my collection. Next is the palettopoly palette from Ace Beauté. They released palettopoly as part of a game, and it was a fun idea. I think it was very novel, very innovative, but also I think that it was a mistake for them to only sell the palette with the game because the game was cute, but not everybody wanted it. Not everybody wanted to pay for it or store it or even play it. I really think they shot themselves in the foot. They should have released the palette as an option, like a separate purchase, and then if you wanted to, you could buy the bundle or buy the game separately or whatever. But the palettopoly palette from Ace Beauté, I do still have. This is an excellent quality palette. I really enjoy the color story. It's a little bit jumbled, it's a little bit random. It's got some darker tones. It doesn't have quite the lightness that I would prefer. I wish there were one or two true pastels in here, but it's got a fun color story. I very much enjoy all the looks I get from it, and it actually is the sort of palette that keeps me inspired. I keep getting ideas, so still in my collection. Before I forget to mention, I did film today's eyeshadow look. It's an odd neutral look for me, but I love it. It is exactly what I wanted it to be. It hasn't been published yet to my channel. It's going to be coming next week, so keep an eye out if you want to see how I did this. I used Sydney Grace shadows, which will show up later in today's video. But let's talk about Blend Bunny. Blend Bunny has had rather a successful year. They're doing really well. I feel like they're one of the darlings of the indie industry right now, and I love the Blend Bunny formula. It's very good. It is very, very good. The mattes, like since they're more recent formulation, the mattes so good, and the shimmers are just very, very sparkly and pretty. I bought the Blend Bunny Lure palette. I think this was launched in the springtime maybe. I think the Lure palette is beautiful. It's kind of, you know, mermaid or siren themed. It has mainly mattes in a color story which I love. Blue, purple, green. You can't really go wrong with that. And then it has this top row of shimmers. Very, very sparkly, really pretty. Yes, I've still got Lure. I think all of you know that Uden is my absolute favorite brand. I love everything that they do. The color stories, the formula, the total performance overall. I love their multi-chromes when generally I don't care for multi-chromes, but the Uden multi-chromes are beautiful. I love their shimmers. Did I say that already? I think the packaging is epic. So Uden for me is always a brand that I'm watching to see what they're doing next. Now, earlier in the spring, they released the Perfect World collection. Was that technically Legendary Diversa? I think it might have been. They collaborated with three creators: Amanda from Makeup Just for Fun, Lauren from Lauren May Beauty, and Betty Jean or Batty Bean. So the three palettes that were created were the Flora Story, the Planet Spirit, and the Sea Talk. Of these three, I have decided to keep two. I have the Planet Spirit palette, which is upside down. I thought that I would pass this one along because for some reason, each time I use it, I keep going into the pinky tones, and I don't know why, because it obviously has other colors. I'm going to keep this for a little while longer and play with the other shades. It's very, very pretty. It doesn't quite have the variety of depth that I want. Again, I wish there were 1 or 2 pastels and 1 or 2 deep shades, but overall it's pretty and I really like the formula. So this one is not a favorite, but it's interesting enough that I'm willing to keep it and try it longer. Then we have the Sea Talk palette from Lauren May Beauty, and I absolutely love this palette. This is so gorgeous. She did an amazing job. I really enjoy, who am I, the neutral corner, but I love that it's paired with non-neutral. It's got colors over here, and the colors work so beautifully. There are some warm tones and some cool tones. Everything's light enough, but then we have a deep shade over here, a couple more interesting colors, an inner corner highlight, and this is, I say it every time, it's a really interesting yellow with a hint of green. Definitely not green, but definitely not a true yellow. And then Iridescent Shell here is an incredible topper shade that can lean pink, but depending on what you put it with, it can go different directions as well. I love the Sea Talk palette from Uden's Eye, and this was the palette that got me watching Lauren May's channel, because I figured if she created this, then we probably at least have something in common. I like her eye looks, and she's just, I enjoy her videos. As far as the Floral Story palette, I do not have that one anymore. It is officially decluttered from my collection, and I feel bad, but that palette doesn't excite me. It doesn't bring me joy, and when I use it, most of the time I'm like, okay, the looks are just so soft, and I don't know. There's something about that palette. I feel like I ought to love it. It is completely up my alley in every way, but there's something about it that doesn't draw me in. So I have decided to declutter Floral Story. A while back, Jaclyn Cosmetics released a palette called Strawberry Feels, and I picked it up secondhand, as I do almost everything. And you know what? Surprisingly, Strawberry Feels is still in my collection. I am genuinely surprised, because this is not a great palette. It's not. It's got cute packaging. It is cute. It's got a very basic color story. It's not neutral, but it's not terribly interesting either. But it does have lightness, and it does have some moderate depth. It has a lot of different light tones. It's got 2 shimmers, so it's matte heavy, which I prefer. And honestly, the formula is not amazing. This formula doesn't have a lot of pigmentation, and it will fade throughout the day. I put this on with full expectation that my look is just going to get softer and quieter as the day goes by. But I love the undertones of this palette. They are so flattering on my skin tone. Whatever it is, it's like a magic combination of my undertones and these undertones. And every time I use this palette, granted, the looks are always the same. They always look the same. But when I use it, I get a lot of comments. Like, people will compliment me on my eyes when I'm wearing these colors. So even though this is probably at this point the lowest performing quality in my collection, I still keep it, because when this is what I want, this is what I'll get. And while I won't love it, I will like it. Okay, let's talk about Glamlite. Glamlite did not fare well in my collection declutter at the end of last year. I really like the Glamlite formula. I think it's excellent, honestly, honestly, the mattes and shimmers. I was going to say especially the mattes, but really the shimmers too. I have just learned over time that I don't love the shimmer formula that is very, very thick and highly emollient and really oily looking. I don't love that formula. That's the reason I'm not actually interested in trying some of the more indie brands that are really hyped about that formula. I just don't love the way it looks on me. I feel like it's just a bit extra, a little bit too far over the top. This is the sort of shimmer that I like. The Adept shimmers and the Uden's Eye shimmers. I really like the Blend Bunny shimmers. They're pigmented. They're a little bit metallic, a little bit foiled, but not too much. And they're extremely sparkly. That's what I really like. So while Glamlite has an excellent formula, I'm not enjoying wearing their formula anymore. So I want to talk about the Glamlite Pot 2 palette, which I got secondhand. No, I bought it new. I bought that one new, but I bought it on sale for like $12. It was a really good sale, because Glamlite always throughout the year has steep discounts as they're getting ready to bring in new collections. And I did have it for most of last year, I think. I don't remember when I got it. I did use it a few times. I loved, again, the blue, purple, green color story. So pretty. I thought the palette had some interesting shimmer options up top, but I didn't use it. It didn't excite me. It didn't get me feeling creative. I didn't feel inspired. So I decided to pass along the Pot 2 palette. Nomad Cosmetics, another brand that I have my eye on, they have really interesting color stories. And again, they had a very successful year last year. They were doing really good with different releases, capturing the attention of people. I love the way that they reveal a new release with the little hints and crosswords and stuff. Really creative. Nomad is a travel themed brand. So one of the palettes I picked up last year was the Monteverde Cloudforest palette, and I do still have this one. This is one of my favorite palettes, period. It's definitely my favorite from the brand. This was based on the Cloudforest in Costa Rica. Oh my goodness, look at this color story. The idea behind this palette was that you're looking through a leafy green canopy in a rainforest or a jungle or something, and you're seeing all the bright tropical birds behind the leaves. So that's why you've got a lot of greens, and then you're spaced out with different vibrant pops of color. I think this palette is excellent. The formula, the quality, all of the shimmers work beautifully. None of them are hard pressed, which was a problem in a few of Nomad's palettes recently. It's heavy on green, and I love green, but then it has all these other colors, and many of them are neon. I think this palette's excellent. I'm so glad that I have it in my collection. I only wish I had the sleeve for it, because the sleeve was sort of like a frosted cover, and the animals that you see here, I think the sloth, and there's a monkey. Is there a monkey? Oh, I don't know. The sloth, the frog, and these birds, they were peeking through the sleeve, like peeking through the frost. Really creative. Nomad always does a great job with their packaging. I need to move a little bit faster here, so let's get going to the Geodes palette from What's Up Beauty. I love this packaging. It's excellent. It feels sturdy and quality, but it's also quite thin and slim. The color story is more neutral leaning, but kind of purpley neutrals with these beautiful pops of color. This is an excellent formula. It's really easy to work with, and again, with the highly sparkly shimmers. Not glitter, but sparkle. Yes. A while back, somebody gave me, for my first Sydney Grace palette, the Quintessence one that Sydney Grace collaborated with Temptalia. I liked it so much, I started buying more Sydney Grace, and now I have the On the Horizon palette, which was the second of that trio. This one I was drawn to because of these green and the fiery peach shimmer. I do wish that one of these were a lighter tone, and that either there was a darker blue shimmer or a lighter blue matte, because these are actually kind of mismatched or reversed on the eye. The shimmer turns out to be darker than the matte on my skin. Aside from that, the quality is amazing. The color story is really, really fun, so I still have On the Horizon as well. I mentioned in the beginning of the video that I have the Flare palette from Ace Beauté. I just upgraded and bought the newer formulation because I love the color story so much, so that one is still in my collection. And now I have another Nomad launch, which I like. I kind of don't love. I'm not sure that I would say I regret it, but it's not getting the use that I thought it would. This is the Verona Love and Death palette, their Valentine's Day release. It opens like this. This is the love side, this is the death side. It's very creative. It's really, really well done. The reason I don't use this as much as I thought I would is twofold. I wish that this side were a little bit more varied, and also the shimmers in this palette are slightly harder pressed. They're hard to pick up. A couple of them are more topper shades. It's not my favorite shimmer formula from Nomad, but I think the color story is fun. I do want to use this one more because it's kind of low on the list and I want to give it more time. Sydney Grace has mainly neutral leaning palettes. They sell tons of singles and they have beautiful colors in their singles, but when you buy a palette from them, it's very heavily neutral because that's their market, that's their audience. So when I saw that they had a colorful palette, I was all over that. Here is the Tropicolor palette when Sydney Grace collaborated with Tina from the Fancy Face. Super colorful, very, very bright. It's a little neutral leaning. The quality, again, the quality is fantastic. It's just gorgeous. The mattes blend like butter. The shimmers are very, very creamy and smooth, very pigmented. They don't have the sparkle that I like, but they're really, really, really good. So the blues in here are amazing. Like this blue is fantastic. And then this white up here, I used this on my inner corner today. It was so bright and white and cool toned that I used it on my inner corner, and then I placed a warmer light toned matte on top of it just to warm up the inner corner to match the rest of my eye look today. This is fantastic. Yes, fantastic. Another thing I used on my eyes today is an Adept shimmer from my original Plain Jane palette, which is not part of today's video, but I'm using that to segue into the only other Adept palette that I have, which is the La Cienega. This was part of the mystery box debacle last year, and I think it really put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, but the reason I bought this palette is because I knew I needed some more neutrals in my collection. I wanted more cool leaning neutrals with depth and variety. So I think that this palette does a good job of that. Obviously, we have light, mid, and dark tones. We've got some pinky leaning, some more harvesty leaning. It's a good assortment of very standard, boring, bland colors. But it's good. I do like it. And then of course this row of shimmers on the bottom are stunning. I think that they launched this palette in the expectation that a lot of recipients would already have the previous Adept palettes, which were all shimmer, 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 shimmer heavy. So they figured, well, we'll just bring in some neutral mattes and that would help round out people's collections. It was a bold move and it did not go down well because for a brand that's known for their shimmers, people were expecting to get new shimmers in a mystery box. Overall, I do like the palette. It's not exciting, but I like it. And then we have Cosmic Beauty. They were Cosmic brushes, now they're Cosmic Beauty. And they released the Serenity palette last year? I guess I'm talking about last year, so I guess it was 2 years ago, 2022. I'm not sure. It's gorgeous and I do own it. I liked it so much and I was so captivated by the promo photos and the color story of the next palette that I bought that. This is the only palette I've ever gotten on pre-order and it's beautiful. This is the Muse palette. It is so, so elegant and soft and quiet, but still colorful. Again, it has a nice mix of neutrals. It has these beautiful pops of color, a couple of more unexpected tones, really fun, beautiful formula, beautiful quality, and a good time. It's just a good time to play with this palette. All right, we're getting towards the end now. Ace Beauté, like I said, I have their Flare palette. All of the other palettes I own from Ace Beauté with the previous formula just didn't excite me, but then I got Palettopoly and I was like, okay, this new formulation's good. Well, then they released the Aura and Envy palettes. I talked myself out of those. I talked myself out of especially the Envy palette, which really caught my attention because it was very similar to their Oceanic palette, which I did own at the time. Now, I owned the Oceanic in the old formulation and I eventually passed it on and I could not get Aura and Envy out of my head. Finally, I found them. I found them secondhand and really, I think these are beautiful. Let me show them to you. Here is Envy, which was the one that just made me drool. Absolutely gorgeous. Again, I think it needs one lighter matte. These two are too similar. This is more blue, this is more green, but they're close and they're very, very close in depth. So a lighter matte would have been great. And then the Aura palette is kind of an unexpected purpley mustard color story. Again, very, very good quality. I really enjoy the Ace Beauté formula. And the shimmers from Ace Beauté, they're kind of a cross, like in the middle between my favorite shimmer formulas and the Glamlite that I have decluttered. They are a little bit thicker, a little bit more emollient, but they're still sparkly and beautiful without having that visual weight. So I like but don't love, but do really, really like the Ace Beauté shimmers. So yeah, I have these and they're really fun. These are actually quite new to my collection. Let's talk about the In Mel's Memory Bundle from Sydney Grace. I had my eye on this for a good year. I was going back and forth between this one or the Natasha Denona, what is it, the Retro Glam, or the alter ego dupe of this color story. I would like to try the Natasha Denona formula, but I almost never like her packaging and I hate the Retro Glam packaging. It is not me. Also, I think that the name is stupid. It's not retro, nor is it glam. Anyway, my ultimate preference was to get the Sydney Grace bundle. I love the formula and I just like this color story better. I think it's more well-rounded and more interesting. But this was being sold for $60, which, I mean, they're great quality shadows, but $60 is not within my budget. Not at all. I tried to find a secondhand a few times. Sydney Grace is one of the few brands that I've noticed that really holds its value secondhand. Some brands, once a palette is released, you can find it way cheaper, but Sydney Grace, people are selling, like they hold these shadows dear. So I couldn't find a Mel's Memory bundle at a price that I could afford, and I just waited and never expected to get it. Then Sydney Grace had a sale. I got the bundle from Sydney Grace's website for, I think it was $40 shipped, which was a steal. And then next time I checked their website, they were no longer offering the bundle. So it might have just been a last call kind of thing. Anyway, this is what I used on my eyes today. Everything on my eyes that you see now is Sydney Grace except the Adept Plain Jane shimmer that I added. And I only added that right over here. It's just on top of a Sydney Grace shimmer. So this is basically a Sydney Grace look from the Mel's Memory bundle, and it's lovely. And finally, the last palette purchase that I made in 2023 was from Uden's Eye. These were palettes that I had my eye on most of the year. When they launched, I thought, oh, that's different for the brand. Different, a little bit unique, and I could really see the merits of them. I was often comparing them to the Christmas palettes, how maybe these were like Uden's Eye's permanent line that was similar to the color stories of the Christmas palettes, but not totally duping themselves. These are the Stone and Rock the Stone and Rock and the Jewels and Gems palettes. Let's show them to you. You know, I started keeping the sleeve on some of my palettes because I have little kids. And my concern is that if a palette drops when it doesn't have a sleeve, it's gonna be much more likely to pop open and get messed with. Or broken, or both. But if it has a sleeve, especially an Uden size sleeve, because they're very, very secure, it might preserve the palette's life a little bit more. And again, holding it upside down. Okay, Jewels and Gem is such a beautiful, cool toned color story. I'm not even gonna talk about how much I love the formula. We've already covered that, but the color story is so interesting. Again, we have lightness and depth. The undertones of this palette really catch my attention. They remind me of the Lust for Dusk palette from ColourPop, just slightly desaturated, but I know that even though the tones are desaturated, the pigment is still very much there. I recently did a look. I used this one here as a transition color and it was beautiful, especially on my undertones, which are blue. Beautiful, beautiful. I'm excited to play with this palette more, to really partner some of these interesting shimmers with the interesting mattes and just see what I can do. This is a beautiful palette. And then the other one is Stone and Rock, which is the green one. When I decided to get these, I was like, well, which one should I get? I finally just got both because they're both beautiful and they have their own merits in their own right. So this is the green one and I love green eyeshadow. This one reminds me a lot of the Dirty Martini palette. In fact, that's my favorite palette. It's also the only one that I have left from Glamlite, and I plan on doing a direct comparison video to see if I need both. I mean, I don't need both. It's eyeshadow. You don't need it at all. To see if I want to keep both, because they might be so close that having both is redundant, in which case this guy's staying and Dirty Martini is out. Again, it has lightness and depth. This is a matte white, which is great, unsurprisingly, and this is a matte black. Really like that they have that. We have a few more grungy or dirty sorts of mattes, and then sort of cleaner kinds of shimmers. I'm talking about the tones. You know, these are like clearer, whereas the mattes look a little bit swampy. And I like that juxtaposition. I like the, you know, cool versus warm and the best of both worlds in one eyeshadow look. To close out this topic, it looks like I bought 21 palettes in 2023 and I have still 17 of them. I think that's pretty great. That means that maybe, I don't know, maybe 40% of my entire collection was purchased last year and was purchased very mindfully and very intentionally to curate what I own for colors and formula and brand. I'm really happy about that. 21 palettes and I've only gotten rid of 4, and this is almost half of what I own altogether. I think that's a success. Do tell me in the comments what you think. I would love to hear your thoughts as usual. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for clicking on my video. I hope you've enjoyed this content and you will consider subscribing before you go if you want to see more. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.